Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics, back on YouTube to break down week 3 in the OUA and set up all the action coming your way. I misspoke, going back over the episode, the week 2 review when we first went on to YouTube. I kept saying live on YouTube. It wasn't live, but just throwing our ugly mugs up there and just seeing what people's reactions would be. Tom, my friend, how are you doing? How you feeling? Having now had the chance to sort of let our beauty shine out there to the world along with our obviously phenomenal OUA football takes.
Well, it used to only be my mom that would tell me I'm handsome, and it still is that way. Nobody else had said anything about it. But no, I am very excited about being on YouTube more than anything. And I said it before, but I'm just excited for people to actually see how genuinely excited you and I get when we're talking about this. Because previously, when it's just the podcast, we're eyes wide, hands are shaking, and nobody can tell because it's just audio. But now you can see how absolutely insane we both are for OUA football.
And to all the haters who always said I had a face for radio, well, I found a way around that one, you MFers. Tom, I want to start off before we get into the games that we have coming up this week, make our predictions, talk about what we're excited to see. With looking at the U Sports Top 10, we're recording here. It's September 6th right now. This will be coming out on the 8th. And of course, whenever you're listening to it, just thank you as always for tuning in. And these Top 10 rankings came out just yesterday. So on the 5th of September. And obviously, we haven't done really any U Sports content outside of the OUA, and we've attempted it in sort of different iterations over the last couple of years. We kind of talked about some things that maybe we do this year. For now, I feel like we're just full steam ahead with our OUA content. So we'll read the list, but obviously more focusing on the OUA standpoint and just thinking about some of the teams we have in here and what we make of that. So, coming at the number 1 slot, we have the Laval Rouge et Or. Number 2, Western. 3, Saskatchewan. Montreal at 4. St. FX at 5. Golden Hawks at 6. Queens at 7. Ottawa at 8. UBC at 9. And rounding out the U Sports Top 10, our Windsor Lancers. Tom, what do you make of that top 10 list? Obviously in order of OUA teams, just in terms of, I guess, how the U Sports ranks them. The top OUA teams right now are Western, Laurier, Queens, Ottawa, and Windsor. And of course, if you look at the OUA standings, and rankings aren't supposed to be standings, it's supposed to be something of a different insight to it. But we have Western, Windsor, Ottawa, and Laurier all tied at 2-0, Waterloo, Guelph 1-1. And then every other team in the OUA, some version of 0-1, 0-2. Obviously, Queens having a bit of the reputation pick there, and they lost to Laurier. But hearing those teams, hearing those names, and of course any comments you may have about the non-OUA teams in the mix there, what were your thoughts seeing the new top 10?
Well, first and foremost, starting outside of the OUA, because I am just a Canadian university football nut, I did have the chance to watch Saskatchewan, Manitoba last week on a Friday night football and in the Canada West. And Saskatchewan looks pretty good. Despite the departure of Mason Nias, their offense still looks pretty good. They came back against Manitoba, who Manitoba looks damn impressive as well, I will say. But they came back in the fourth quarter and scored, I believe it was 16 points to come back and win the game. So Saskatchewan's going to be another killer. Obviously, Laval being Laval, they're the champs until you knock them off, similar to Western here. But I do find it very strange, the rationale behind a lot of this stuff, because obviously you can tell that there's something of a reputation bias where you have Queens at number 7 when they're 0-1, and Ottawa, Laurier, Windsor all 2-0. And so you look at that and you say, okay, yes, there's a recency bias. Queens was in the Yates Cup last year. They still look pretty good despite losing to Laurier. Sure. But if you're utilizing that, how do you justify putting Windsor below Ottawa if you've watched Windsor and Ottawa play both of those games? Windsor regardless of what you think about the potentials of both, Windsor has by far looked more impressive than Ottawa has in their 2 wins. So what is your justification for putting Ottawa above that if you're going by the reputation or from what you see? Like, do they think that Ottawa has the higher ceiling than Windsor, or is it just because Windsor has historically been not a very good football team, so the cracking of the top 10 is just such a huge thing for them? Like, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think the rationale is?
What the rationale is, obviously hard to tell. I'm happy that's where you went, because that was like everything else kind of made sense as far as our OUA teams in there. And of course, having Ottawa and Windsor makes sense, not being as linked into the other conferences as you are. Admittedly, I guess it would come back down to, they matched up twice last year, including in a playoff game that Ottawa picked up the win in. Obviously, next week, as we're going to go through these games, Ottawa is on their bye, and it'll be fascinating. And, with Windsor going to Waterloo, one of the 2 teams that Ottawa has beaten, albeit Ottawa beat them at home. So if Windsor goes into next week 3-0, Ottawa's sitting at 2-0, and now we have that shared opponent and a victory in both cases. Does that jump Windsor over Ottawa? And certainly, though, whatever you think about that, when we do get to week 4, we get Windsor going to Ottawa. So scores will be settled one way or another on that front. So I don't really know. I mean, obviously, I think they just have a collection of folks that, for goodness knows what reason, doesn't include you or I, where they just pull their top 10 lists. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it includes our guy Deshaun and whatnot, who obviously is completely deserving of having that type of input. So I don't know if it's as much, I don't know if it's as much like an algorithm of any kind of just what folks think. But yeah, it was the Ottawa Windsor piece that I think it seems like folks are rolling just towards the reputation. But yeah, definitely in the early returns, we're seeing this Windsor team look certainly stronger, though of course we're a week away from having them go head to head. The other thing that stood out to me real quickly, perusing the U Sports page, pulling that up, was seeing that in the players of the week for U Sports, special teams player of the week went to none other than Kieran Flannery Fleck, who's a name that OUA fans should be familiar with because I believe he was kicking at at Carleton for a couple of years. They have Brandon Forsey. I think there might have been a bit of crossover there, but he's out at UBC right now and went 6 for 6 in their last game in the win against Regina. So shout out to, he's an Ottawa boy, so I'm fairly certain if I'm at least if I'm wrong on the Carleton piece, probably went to Ottawa U, but certainly very certain that's a former OUA guy doing his thing out there for the Thunderbirds. So shout out to him. Shout out to all the other conferences. Maybe we will put together some kind of out of conference content somewhere in the season, but it's always sort of in the works for us as we think about the ways to continue to grow our brand and keep you informed. Tom, anything else, news and notes before we hop into these slate of games and begin to break them down?
Yeah, just thought it was very interesting that despite all of the great performances that we saw in the OUA, even when you're rolling through this list here of who won, obviously you see Alberta, UBC, and Montreal represented here. But even when you roll through some of the other nominees, like for the offensive nominee, it's Mohsen Jamal. And he had an unbelievable game against McMaster, don't get me wrong, but the guy throwing to him also had a pretty damn good game as well. And you're looking at things, and what I will say is it is still so damn cool to see Ethan Gregorevich. He gets the nod from the defensive side on the OUA, so that's pretty neat. And Alfred Olay is the nomination from the OUA for the special teams player. Your boy, Alfred.
Dude, Alfred Olay. Go Lions.
Little surprised not to see any OUA representation in here, but plenty of season left to go. I'm sure we're gonna snag a few.
Yeah, and obviously, as you were leaning towards like specifically not seeing Hillock's name in the mix, because I have like he's obviously only 2 games, but averaging 346 yards. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good at the football. Well, you mentioned my guy Alfred Olay plays for the York Lions. Maybe you heard of them, and they will be heading into your alma mater, into Ron Joyce Stadium, kicking off our Week 3 slated games this Saturday. York at Mac, of course, if you didn't pick up all the clues there. 1 o'clock start. Now, obviously, as we've kind of mentioned, mostly in me teasing you, Tom, this was a matchup that York picked up the win last year, of course, in the fashion of a forfeit due to a disqualified player or an ineligible player. The actual score, I believe, was something to the effect of 39-1. So just in case anyone's uncertain of just like, if you missed our tier pods and you're new to this programming, you saw the thumbnail of, us two goofballs on your YouTube page, you're like, what's these guys' deal? What's OUA football? Just so you know, there is a divide amongst these two teams. However, we talked about leaving that Western MAC game, the wins and the losses, or the wins and the loss, so to speak, the things you took away were really positive for MAC and frankly really positive for York despite their losing at Waterloo. But one of the things that we did talk about in specific with MAC, and of course, one of us, I can't remember who, harped on the Mac O-line pretty rough. I think it was you, Tom. I think you said some nasty stuff about them. I don't know. I can't remember. That sounds like me. I've been hitting the head too many times. But putting that aside, we did look at a guy like Jason Hanvier Messier, defensive lineman for York, perhaps being someone that could give Mac trouble. That comment. Any other things you kind of think about in this matchup? Some of the things we saw from York in terms of how they were moving the ball. What do you think about this matchup? Clearly, it's not the most exciting one, if we're being honest, just as far as outcomes and things like that. But just what are you looking for? And especially with Mac, where we've really stamped them as like, no, this team is certainly good. They have their foibles, as all these teams do, and they can continue to grow. So what is the growth you're looking for against an opponent like York?
Yeah, it's interesting because when it comes to York, pretty much every other team that you're looking at, there's a pretty strong feeling of doesn't really matter how you did it. You got the dub. That's you got it in the regular season. Let's move on. You see them in the playoffs. If you do, you don't, whatever. But when it comes to York, essentially every single team that they are going to play against, they are going to be the underdogs here, and by a pretty large margin. So this is the one game where it does matter how you win. If Mac comes away with a win here and it's like 14-0, that's a loss. That is a big loss, And even like last year, I was in attendance at that McMaster York game when they won 39-1. Honestly, that's not a win. That was not a win. The way that they played, that game should have been closer to like the Western score that we saw from this year. Andreas Dueck, all of the offense, all of the amazing playmakers that we saw last year, the amount of times that they would drive the field and once again not be able to finish in the end zone. And like, you can't finish in the end zone against York. And I really don't want to harp on these guys because, like we've been saying, York has just been kicked while they are down consistently over and over again. But let's be honest here. The weakest team in the OUA, you should be able to dominate here. And you like the nice thing, the negative thing, whatever. Yes, you're going into this. It's most likely going to be a win for McMaster, but it can go wrong so quickly. Because when you're expected to win and win big and then you don't, that's almost it. You almost treat it like a loss.
Yeah, this goes back to that sort of that idea of there's good losses, there's bad wins, right? That's clearly what you look at with this. I mean, this is a whole other level of like, this isn't a conversation about trap game. I think that's so far beyond it, even though I am peeking ahead on the schedule a little bit. We have, the Battle of Highway 6 the following week when Mac's going to be hosting Guelph, which we'll get to their game against Laurier shortly and some of our thoughts about them. And we really talked about that opening game was so crucial, like, spot on by, I think you were, saying how that week one matchup between these two clubs in Windsor and Mac was really going to have such a big impact. Because then Mac goes to Laurier the week after that, Toronto after that. Waterloo, so a bit of a soft schedule there. Then they finish off with Ottawa on the road before getting their bye week in the last week. And you want to just keep that mojo rolling, especially when you have Guelph. You have like this stretch, like get things in gear. You want to build off of what you showed last week against Western. For York, hey, I mean, they were able to put together a few drives. Obviously, 32 points is spectacular for them. Like, say what you want about the opponent, and it's an opponent who held the Ottawa GGs to 29 points in Ottawa. And what was it? 14 of those coming in the fourth quarter. So, like, not for nothing, we talked about some of those guys on that Waterloo defense that, some veteran players out there and that were really stifling the Ottawa run at times until Polk kind of just went off in the fourth. So, is something there, something, everything or nothing, who knows? Probably nothing. I'm in agreement. For Mac, this is about keeping that ball rolling, getting that momentum going into a pretty tough part of your schedule. And, we've talked about some of those matchups in week 9 in our tier pods and everything like that. Can you imagine, like I have a hunch that when we get to week 9, those Marauders are going to be sitting around. Maybe they'll do it at the stadium where they're going to have a couple games on TV and they're going to be like let's go Queens, or like let's go whomever it is, because they're having that last week bye when you're maybe not probably, but you might be on that fringe area. Wow, that's gonna be fascinating to see. I can imagine what that's gonna be like, but maybe I'm dead wrong on that. Commentary otherwise on this, Tom, I don't have much else. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I will say there's almost nothing worse than having a last week bye and not having a playoff spot secured. And so now you're having to rely on the play of another team and hopefully the numbers work out, whatever. I can't imagine something that would be more stressful when your future is not in your own hands. Mac, you got to take care of business the rest of this year if you don't want that to happen. And the other side of things, if the history and the trend continues and you're actually out of the playoffs this year, there's also nothing worse than watching the last game of the regular season where everybody else gets one more game and you're done. So I know this is still just week 3, lots and lots and lots of football left to go, but you can't continue to lose the close games. You got to find a way to win here. And I don't think it's any surprise we're both going with McMaster to win this game.
Lock it in.
Man, I want to see them look sharp. I have total confidence that defense is going to do its thing. What's that offensive line going to do against this York team, which, yes, they only scored 1 point the last game, but last year, York secured 6 sacks against McMaster. Jason Javier only had 2 of those. So there's other guys on this team that are able to do some work here. So yeah, we got to make sure that we can protect Keegan, that he gets some good habits like we were talking about before, and freaking convert in the damn red zone. Get your asses into the end zone. That's what my notes are for this team.
I'm just trying to do the math in my head. I don't remember the number from the Carleton game, so I don't really know. Like, how many sacks did Mac give up between just York and Carleton alone? That's
something like 14.
Yikes. Yeah, it's Mac at home in this one all the way. And yeah, let's see what kind of performance they can do. I'll stick with the mantra: don't play with your food. Let's go with 2 other teams. Both playing in the 1 o'clock slot. It's the Laurier Golden Hawks traveling to Guelph to take on the Griffins. Guelph coming off the loss at Windsor in bad fashion. We've talked about good losses. That was as bad a loss as you can get. And of course, Laurier coming off of, having their 2-0 start, being top 10 ranked in all of U sports. But from the offensive side of the ball, a team that, similarly with Mac, you can kind of see maybe Folds or Galloway being like, hey, every time we break down, the word is finish. The word is finished. Let's end with 7s. As Mad Jack said, they got perhaps the best kicker in the country. From the sounds of it, there's obviously a couple of guys out of province that are competing for that title, no doubt. But you can't be relying on the fact that he can hit it from anywhere. In the case of Guelph, Who's going to start at quarterback? Are they going to go McCray from the jump? I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, I know he got a couple of touchdowns against U of T, or got a touchdown at U of T and then at Windsor. And it's obviously still only 2 weeks into the season, but he's one of the top rushing touchdown top in rushing touchdowns so far this year. Their defense, who's injured, who's in, who's not. Laurier on the defensive side, we know they're going to be solid. What are you looking for more so? For Laurier to put a stamp on this game, or for Guelph to figure their you-know-what out?
Can I say both?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm like, quite honestly, from Laurier, the biggest question marks right now are with the offense. And shockingly, really, because you've got studs in Taylor Elgersma and Ethan Jordan and Raiden Thorne, and like names we continuously talk about each and every single week. But you haven't been able to convert a single touchdown through the air yet. And we're going into week 3. That I never thought that we would be talking like that going into this game with an offense like this. And so I think when you're getting to that point, yeah, you know what, you're winning these games, and the offense is obviously a big part of that. You're getting in position so that you can kick field goals or that you can rush in for touchdowns, and you're winning those games. But I think if you want to make it out of the OUA, you got to be firing on all cylinders regardless of who you are. I want to see Taylor Elgersma find the end zone here, and it's going to be difficult because all of the tape says run the damn ball against these Griffins, because you're going to see some things. Now, are we going to see Tanner Nelms back? Is Bassick Hayden, is he going to be back here as well? Is it just going to be the Quentin Scott show? And like we said, Quentin Scott, phenomenal running back. He's not the kind of guy who naturally will go downhill. I'm sure he will, because he is a great athlete, but his first instinct is to try to bounce outside. And a lot of the times that we saw here, the style of running between Mambo, John, and Zorn is that they're downhill runners. They're willing to run guys over in order to get the first down. And they can make guys miss, but I don't know how effective an outside runner trying to get to the edge is going to be against these Griffins, because they are fast and they can make tackles. So we'll see. I have a lot of questions here. And for Guelph, man, establish something, guys. Let's make sure that let's get our quarterback, whoever you're going with, whether it's McCray, whether it's Abood, get him in there and keep him in there, and just allow them to make mistakes. Allow them to make mistakes at full speed to gain that experience, whatever you got to do. But rely on Donovan Malloy. He's been great. You know, yes, he had a few yards last game. A big chunk of that was a 75-yarder. But like you said, not every Joe Blow off the street can get 75 yards and a touchdown in an OUA game. That's still a very difficult thing to do. So lean on him. Lean on the offensive line that you guys have. Hopefully Tommy Barakis is back at left tackle there, so that shores that up a little bit. But yeah, I want to see a little bit more. And damn, defense. Let's get going here. You've got a legendary coach in Dennis McPhee. Like, let me see something here. Let me see some life in there that I saw against Toronto.
I think that's where this game is the most interesting, because I'll go ahead and kind of spoil my pick. I'm going with Laurier in this game. But what is it we want to see from Guelph in the assumption that they do lose? Well, this Laurier defense we know is stout. So especially without Isaiah Smith, yeah, maybe they can stick with the one quarterback. And hey, you know what? Like, as much as we like to get on the pod, and I mean, we were rolling last year with a pretty reputable voice as far as quarterback decisions in a guy named Nate Hobbs, and he was pretty much in agreement with our takes on this. So not for nothing, but you know, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. Guelph's gonna Guelph, but Laurier is a really strong defense in themselves. The big question, I think, and you hit on it in a couple of those things you were mentioning, is really, especially if we still don't have Tanner Nelms in. And, you know, you go back to that Queens game, and obviously I'm so excited to have Queens playing again this week. Like, as great as the last week's slate of games was, it's just like one of our top dogs just wasn't playing last week, you know? And like, obviously off of that week 1 loss to Laurier, a lot of things we want to see. We want to see them playing at their peak potential. But, you know, in that game, Tanner Nelms only rushes it 3 times for 12 yards himself. Scott 15 for 82. And so kind of that piece we talked about of like, does having Nelms in there kind of unlock something with their offense where, is he the, the peanut butter, the jelly of Quentin Scott, the, whatever other, analogy you want to throw in there. Obviously, that Queens game was a low-scoring affair, beat-em-up affair. The wind at New Richardson Stadium obviously playing a big part in it. But yeah, I think for Guelph, once again, from my perspective, thinking that, Laurier is the better team, coming into your house, sure, but I think they'll pick up the win. It's really, and given how Laurier is yet to shine on offense yet. Like, that's my big thing. Once again, you can see the space I'm sitting in here now. Like, still very, proud Guelph alum and the things that we accomplished there and some of the things that they've been able to do in the years after we left in 2015. It comes down to this. Don't be the team where we're talking at the end of the season or in a tier pod next year being like, it was really in that Guelph game where Laurier's offense came to life. Because you know what? That's exactly what we said about Windsor. It was against the Guelph Griffins that we found out Windsor was for real. And there's certain things, once again, that go beyond just a loss or just a win. When you lose at home and then, schmucks like you and I talk about like, oh, hey, that's what it took, I guess. And I obviously joked after Laurier's win against Carleton, where it was like, well, good thing they got Guelph coming up to figure out their run game stuff. But you know what? It could be true. So for me, that's really it for Guelph. If they pick up the win, like, amazing. As you said, Donovan Malloy, hey, have yourself a game, man. You know what? Like, he obviously can bust some of those big runs. It's a great Laurier defense, but, it's a strong offensive line for the Guelph Griffins. Maybe it'll happen, right? Maybe they'll make some plays happen on specials. Who knows? But I'm more concerned about the way that the loss could look, and that's certainly where I'm leaning in this one. How about yourself, Tom?
Yeah, great call outs, honestly. I think that there's a lot of things with this Guelph team that I want to see. We talked about it with Laurier, and there's a lot of potential opportunities that they have in order to establish their offense a little bit more, have Taylor Elgers might get on the board in the passing touchdown column, and hopefully try to open up that offense and get a little bit more confidence going with there. But, man, Guelph, like, we talked about it before. We talked about it before the season started and even into the Toronto game. There are so many athletes on this team. You've got so many studs at so many different positions. Yes, they are, for the past couple of seasons, they've been battling that injury bug like crazy. And I don't know what's going on over there, but they are losing a lot of their key guys. But, like, the next man up mentality, you got to be able to just pick up from where you're leaving off. Obviously, it's really hard to replace a Scott Murray, an Anthony
Christian
Martuzzo, and these guys. But, like, man, guys, let's get going here. Griffins, let's see some life. Let's see something. This should be. I was looking at this game before the season started as, oh man, this is gonna be a barn burner. Zach, we gotta get to this one. This is gonna be, and now it's like. I want to see these Guelph Griffins play like the team I know they can be. And that, I'm just a fan. I can only imagine how you feel as an alumni. We talked about my own frustrations with my Marauders. What is it like with your Guelph Griffins?
You know what? I actually feel okay. But at least, for Guelph, we talked about they have Mac the following weekend, then they get a bit of their lighter stretch with York and with Waterloo, and they are that team. And once again, that MAC game, we obviously, as you completely hit the nail on the head. We were talking about this as one of those games we were really stoked about. I think having seen a few things now, and especially assuming that, Mac's going to pick up the win against York, we could have these two teams both at 1-2 going into that week 4 matchup. And we talked about, some of those things we talked about of ways that you could spice up the OUA and maybe having more rivalry weeks or really trying to amp them up. If people don't know because I don't. It's not as sexy as Queen's Western Battle Waterloo Panda game. The Battle Highway 6, whatever you want to call it, Mac Guelph is I mean, and maybe it's just the era that you and I played in, where it like we played like many times and 3/8 cups, where that was to quote Taylor Swift, baby, we had bad blood, man. I'm going with Laurier.
I'm going with Laurier. It's got to be the Golden Hawks. I think they get it done in Guelph.
Homecoming for Todd Galloway as well. So we'll see if he has any tricks up his sleeve. Now, as you said, we thought about maybe this was a game we were going to be at for a good chunk of time. I thought I was going to check out Queens at U of T, and maybe when you're watching this, listening to this on Friday, or once again, whenever you will, this will be just a, what do they call it, an old take exposed or whatever. But there's a good chance that I won't be at either of those two games because I might be doing color commentating.
Yeah, you are. Hell yeah.
With Adam McGuire for the Waterloo Warriors home game versus the Windsor Lancers. Now, this is the tricky thing, Tom, is that like my understanding is that, despite what we hear on sports broadcasts across the world, in theory, as a broadcaster, you're supposed to be impartial. And I'd like to think, in theory, doing our thing at the 55, you obviously asked my take as a Griffin alum and what I got in my room here. And, you got your McMaster ties and everything like that. I don't know how I can... And maybe they'll hear this on Friday and be like, yeah, Zach, you had the job, but now we're taking it away from you. I don't know how I can be anything but impartial in that game with, our Windsor Lancers, with your American son, the pride of Flint, Michigan, Joey Zorn, rolling into the KW to take on Waterloo. And the other thing I want to say real quickly, before getting your thoughts on this, perusing through the Windsor roster, I mentioned on a couple other pods about how Christopher John's a Toronto guy from Chaminade College, the Chaminade Griffins. It did occur to me that it was another running back who was from Chaminade who played there, actually a teammate of mine from the Metro Toronto Wildcats back in the day, Marvin Gaynor, the Chaminade to Windsor connection. But our guy, Mambo, another Toronto guy from a school that I did battle with back in the day, Leaside High School. Tom, take a wild guess what Leaside, big capital L in the front, what Leaside's mascot is.
Come on, are they the Lions?
Leaside Lancers, but close enough. Tom, going back a few years, this was actually a really great matchup that we got for a couple of years when it was Sam Gerard at Windsor, Trey Ford, and a couple of these were like shootouts. I pulled the scores up. I for some reason closed the tabs on my laptop, but these were a couple of games that we saw in the late 2010s and I think even in the 2021 season that were really exciting. There's just something, maybe it's when you just the two W's doing battle on the scoreboard. From what we've seen so far, I don't think that is what we're getting today. But what are you thinking about this matchup with the Warriors hosting the Lancers?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to take a look at what this game meant a couple years ago, even, where both of these teams were kind of in the same spot. And if anything, Waterloo had a little bit of the edge here with Windsor trying to crack into the, 500 club, making the playoffs consistently kind of thing. Now we've seen a very drastic change in that, where these Windsor Lancers certainly look very impressive at least 2 weeks in here. And, and maybe that's a credit to... Well, not maybe. It is a credit to the Don, Coach Cercelli, and the amazing work that him and his staff have done. Maybe this is a conversation for next year in terms of what kind of new coaching are you bringing to these Waterloo Warriors if you can't get it done this year? And I'm not saying Bert's going anywhere, because I love Bert and I think he's doing great things for that program.
Yeah.
But like, how happy are you with the defense? How happy are you with the offense? How happy are you with the position groups as things are kind of happening here? And that's another big question that maybe we'll answer on another pot in the off season. But you can clearly see the differences between the coaching staffs and the positive effects that it's had on one particular team versus the other one that's kind of stayed a little stagnant over the years. A little bit of change here and there, but for the most part, pretty stagnant. So yeah, I certainly think that that's another interesting little tidbit to kind of call out here. There's a lot of things that could go wrong for these Waterloo Warriors, considering the role that these Windsor Lancers are on. But we've seen some flashes. If Ottawa is the number 8 team in the country and Nolan Caban, who was technically their backup, was able to keep that team in the game despite throwing 4 interceptions in the first week, well, then maybe Waterloo has a little something. Maybe there's something there.
Maybe there's something there. But this is,
I was waiting for that, but
I was that butt was stretched out just a touch longer as the page was loading to get York's net rushing yards from last week, and it was only 125 yards. But when you extrapolate that out to an actual OUA football team, and not just an actual legitimate OUA football team, but a higher, if not top tier OUA football team, that quickly perhaps turns into like 300, 400 yards on the ground that we're looking at from the three-headed monster of Zorn, Mambo, and John. It's going to be tough sledding for Waterloo in this one. I guess I don't really know what the comments are on this one. Obviously, we saw a guy in Springer for Waterloo have a nice day running the ball for them. Is that a flash in the pan? Is he something that they can look forward to, as you talked about them being in this rebuilding stage? Nick Orr, what was that? I think it was 9 for 11, like not too many passes. Like maybe we see him get unleashed because, there is that thing when, you look at a box score at the end of the game and, you see, and you know what, as much as, sometimes like some of these quarterbacks that we see on lesser teams who do still put up good numbers. Well, yeah, sometimes it's because your team's bad. And so you're just having to throw it a ton of times. And we saw that with Caban in a couple of games last year. And we haven't quite seen that from Orr yet. So maybe that's this opportunity where it's like, what, at the very least, because once again, this whole theme, and golly, if I'm not a broken record, I don't know what I am at this point, of spoiler alert, going Windsor in this game, even though I guess from having Jack on, he didn't pick in games that he was on our pod. When he was on our pod that he was going to be calling. So I guess I just broke another rule of broadcasting, but oh well. In the loss, if it's an opportunity to say, all right, man, you're going to throw it 25, 30 times if we get enough possessions to do that, and let's see what you can do. I guess maybe that's what we look for, because we certainly saw their running game come alive, albeit against York. What can this... And well, I mean, Basiliga obviously had the 2 touchdowns. Maybe that's what we look for. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. Clearly, despite, as I said, possibly being in the booth, I've yet to do the in-depth research that I certainly will before step behind that mic. What else you got on this, Tom?
Well, this is the other thing. When we're looking at things, obviously the rushing attack for Windsor is really the focal point for this offense right now. Zach, who do you think has the better defense, Guelph or Waterloo? And if you think it's Guelph, do you think that Windsor rushes for more than 488 yards on the weekend?
I do think it's Guelph. And yeah, well, but is it their rushing defense that's maybe not as good as it? No, it's just, yeah. I mean, we mentioned guys' names like, the like Andrews and the younger Hinsberger and Hergott and some of those guys, but like, I don't know, man. It's gonna be tough sledding. I mean, not for Windsor. It's gonna be literally like they're in practice on the blocking sled.
I was going with it like they're on a sled going downhill in the wintertime.
It could be that too, Yeah. I don't know.
I'm going Windsor here. I think you and I have pretty much shown how incredibly passionate we are about these Windsor Lancers and how nice it is to see a team that's historically been at the bottom coming up to the top here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see if Waterloo comes out and they pull something like a McMaster where there's a 50 front and they are loading up the box and trying really desperately to stop the run. We've seen Danny Skelton be solid. Is he capable of having Evan Hillock type numbers where he's throwing for maybe 400 yards and 5 touchdowns and all of this stuff? I don't doubt it, but we haven't seen it yet. And so I'm interested to see if that's the case. And certainly maybe it's a a preview of what will happen in later games, especially against like the Westerns of the world and the GGs. If they're going to load up against the run and do everything they can to stop the three-headed monster that showed themselves against the Griffins, what is Danny Skelton and these receivers going to do in order to get them out of that? Are they good enough to get them out and to really showcase, hey, no, we've got a real serious threat in the backfield here, and you have to respect our pass game?
And I really like that take because, when you go through their schedule, right? Like, and as we've said a few times, like obviously that MAC game, despite Windsor kind of dominating in the game, despite the score, close game. One or two bounces go the other way, that game could be completely different. And then they do what they did to Guelph, and maybe not in the fashion we expected, but I think we expected them to pick up the win at the very least. They have this game at Waterloo, but we talked about just how devastating their schedule is. Like, talking about algorithms, like I don't know how Windsor, who already has, usually one of the short end of the stick in terms of travel, just based on their geography. We come out of this week, then they go to Ottawa, then they host Queens, they host Western, and then they finish at Laurier, and then they have York at the end of the season. But that four in a row of those top dogs, the other four teams in the top U Sports. So I guess once again, same with Laurier, where it's like establish some of those things that perhaps we haven't seen, that if you're going to be a truly well-rounded team, top dog going with the Westerns of the world, the Queenses of the world, and obviously I'm super excited for their shot at Ottawa next week. Maybe it is trying to unlock Skelton a little bit. We're both on Windsor. I'm not going to try and squeeze any more passion out of this game. Like if we can't say all that much more about this one, then I don't know what to do with it. But maybe we'll be surprised.
Well, listen, the one thing that I will say about this is I am so damn excited to hear my guy on the call. I am 1000%. I'm absolutely going to be watching this live. Right now, I'm debating on whether or not I'm going to make the trip to Waterloo just so I can turn my seat around and watch my guy in the box rather than the game, because I know you're going to have a huge smile on my face and you're going to love it so much. But yeah, I'm so stoked for you, man.
Well, thank you. Once again, if I haven't said anything on the pod yet so far that's going to get me canned from that opportunity, if someone listens to it in the Waterloo area before, in the, I guess, in about 13 hours it'll be from when the pod drops on Friday to when we kick off on Saturday. Then, at the very least, I'll be sitting there with you in the stands if that comes to pass. I'll make you that promise. We move from our 1 o'clock games into the 3 o'clock game, where we have a historic matchup, if only in reputation of the teams, where we have Queens coming off the week 2 bye, going to visit the U of T Blues. Obviously one of the frustrating things doing what we do, Tom, and trying to bring as much depth of analysis, but also historical precedents and all these things, is that it can be tough to dig up things about previous matchups. And the best I could find, and albeit, I gave myself like a half hour of Googling of like Queens U of T football history, rivalry, all that stuff. The best I got was a Reddit page r/Queens University of someone being like, I got accepted to Queens and U of T, and where do I go? And then kind of the thread continued like that. No one in the thread mentioned football, but I'll put that one aside. I'll admit, like, we've talked so much about being at Varsity Stadium. I'm so excited to see Queens, as we kind of mentioned, with the lost week 1 and the week 2 bye, and I'm sure we're still very bullish on what they can do, no doubt, as you should be too. So it's like, it's almost like it's like your favorite TV show and it lives with a cliffhanger. It's like, oh my God, little Timmy fell in the well. How are they getting? There's only 5 minutes left in this episode, right? And so now we passed the week. We're here. We're ready to go. What's the number one thing you're looking for in this one? Once again, it's a little lopsided, I suppose. And when we think about where these teams, we sort of stack them, Queens coming off the bye, and everything like that. But certainly a lot of things of interest in this one, and what piques yours?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I'm really interested in is, how is Queens going to come out in this game? What's their mentality going to be like? Because they lost a game against Laurier by 1 point. When you lose a game by 1 point, as I can tell from experience, you analyze every single thing that you did, because one different thing can change the outcome of that game. It can always, one play can always change the outcome of the game. But when you only win or lose by 1 point, anything that happens can almost change the outcome of that game. And so I'm sure that these Gales are stewing over that. And knowing now that if they lose against Western, which is a very strong possibility, there's a strong chance that they come out of the quarterfinals in the playoffs and have an away game instead of home games until the Yates Cup. That hasn't happened in a very long time, other than the Yates Cup last year. They've had home games pretty solid since post-COVID, quite honestly. So that's another big thing. How do you do against whatever? So right now, I'm sure that Queens gets this loss and they go into the week 2 bye. No one's really hurt. Well, maybe there's a couple of people who are dinged up from training camp because we saw some people who weren't playing in the Laurier game in week 1 and things. But for the most part, everybody should still be healthy. It's very early in the season. So you're not taking time off like you would in a normal bye week. You are instead practicing and you're trying to clean up all of the mistakes that you made. But now you're stewing over it. You're just focusing on that next week after they played against Laurier. They're not prepping for any other team technically. I'm sure probably they're putting in some work here for this one, but you're just focusing on yourself and focusing on how do you clean up the mistakes and things, and hyper focusing on the game. So do they come out teeth gritted and so angry? And you and I both know, especially as offensive linemen, if you're playing like rage filled, you're not thinking straight, and suddenly you're not making the proper decisions, and you're trying to just throw haymakers when you should be strategic about certain things. And does Toronto get up here with Kinsale Phillip and his ability to just bust open a play at a moment's notice? Or does Queens resettle, kind of adjust the tie, get back to business, and showcase what they can do? Because that is going to be a massive tell to how they do come playoff time.
I'm almost positive it's the latter, and for 2 reasons, and kind of like based like in direct response to a couple of things that you mentioned. One, from a couple people I know around the Queens team, and kind of asking how things were going in training camp, and asking like how are they feeling like in comparison with Western, and the response I was getting from people I was messaging is just like, we're focusing on our game. And I think that's the attitude, especially because, as we've seen now, if you were hyper-focused on Western, well, can I interest you in some Laurier stock? How about perhaps the Windsor Lancers? Have you heard of them? But then on that piece of the recovery and having that week 2, going back to that Laurier game and people being banged up, we didn't see Anthony Souls in that game. And my understanding is that it was an injury and he'll be back and everything like that. So getting that, that 2-headed monster of Kasari and Souls going, and also seeing Alex Vreekin, right? Like, I think that's as big as anything what was not disappointing. Like, the schedule makers, everyone gets their bye and whatnot. Like, but, he goes 12 for 27, 170, a TD in their home opener and the loss against Laurier, as you mentioned. And I think that was the most disappointing thing, not having them in week 2, where I'm just like, I really want to see Vreekin cook, man.
And it's interesting as well, because watching that Queens Laurier game, Vreekin goes, like you said, 17 for 27, 170 and a touchdown. Taylor Elgersma goes 30 for 39, 286 and a pick. But despite that, I would argue that Elgersma very much so outplayed Alex Vreekin with the majority. Obviously, they didn't finish in the end zone, but the chemistry that they showcased in that game between Elgersma, Ray Thornton, Ethan Jordan, and the rest of the receivers that were there looked very, very impressive throughout that game. And so I think that Vreekin is probably watching that and really itching to showcase, hey, you know what? I got a hell of a lot better from last year. I took all of that knowledge that I had when I came in as the unprepared starter, as if you want to call it, and I did pretty damn good last year, and I'm only going to get better. So I think that this is going to be a bit of a coming out party for Mr. Vreekin. I think that for sure the rushing attack with Queens is good. We know that. Kasari, if Anthony Souls is back, like those are some dominant players. But I think Alex Vreekin comes out against this U of T team and lights it up.
And it almost makes me think of the commentary you were mentioning in thinking about Windsor and Waterloo, where, we saw what Ottawa with Amilcar Polk did against U of T at U of T and everything like that. And with the offensive line they have, even if it's just Kasari, but especially if they have Souls back, Queens can just win this on the back of that running game. But as you said, we need to get these guys going. We need to get, obviously the rust off of just coming off of, training camp, having one game, having a bye week, because then it's Western next week. It's Windsor the week after that. So it's really fascinating with a lot of these teams where even when some of these games, like I guess this is perhaps the theme that I'm realizing in the course of this conversation, though not sort of ahead of time, just kind of the beauty of having these conversations off the cuff sometimes, which is that for a lot of these teams that we think are the favorites in these games, it's still, though I'm sure the coaches and the players won't admit it, and maybe they aren't doing it, and so we'll just do it for them of like, win your game, get the W, get the extra notch in the win column, but we're actually looking ahead because we know who the upper crust of this league is, and football is certainly a game of many things, and that ephemeral mojo is certainly one of them. And will Queens get their mojo back? Coming off the bye against, once again, a historic rival in U of T. And, literally, if there was any other place I'd be other than calling that game at Waterloo, it'd be sitting with you at Varsity Stadium again for another week and watching that matchup. Tom, for me, it's Queens all the way in this one. Though I think they will maintain their decorum, maintain that posture, that tie done up, that professionalism. I'm sure under the surface, they're coming in with a big FU and looking to just put a stomp and just show what they can do.
Yeah, I'm rolling with these Gales as well. I think exactly like you said, they get back to business. And I think, honestly, it's going to be a little bit of column A and column B, where they are straightening up the tie and looking a little professional, but there's maybe a little bit of a back shot as they're walking by kind of thing and showcasing, hey, you know what? We're going to do this. And we're going to do this professionally, the Queen's way. But it's also the Queen's way to hang 60 on opponents. So maybe we're going to do a little bit of that. And it's interesting here, and we can talk about this obviously in the next game as well, but almost this entire week here, I'm going to assume that you and I are on the same page with every pick. We have been so far, at least. But this is a week almost building towards next week and
calm
looking
before
forward.
the storm.
Like you said, we've got the Battle of Waterloo next week. We got the Battle of Highway 6 next week. We got Western Queens next week. Windsor, Ottawa. Like
Carleton York.
Oh my God. But there's so many, next week is going to be must-watch TV across the board. And yet of 4 out of the 5 games are still at 1:00. So, but yeah, this entire week here is going to be establish yourself, get back to basis, really showcase and establish some confidence, because damn, all of these teams are going to need it when you head into the next week.
Yeah, this is like in the Twin Towers, the prolonged scene of they're in Helm's Deep and they're just arming every man and child and, wetting every sword and putting all the bows in the quivers. And you're like, all right, come on, where are the orcs at? Let's get to business. That's week 4. But to not sell us completely short on this week, let's go to our final game, the nightcap of the game, where the Western Mustangs are taking their show on the road to visit the Carleton Ravens, who open up their home campaign. Before we get into the analysis of this game, and certainly, these two teams are once again kind of polar opposites, and Carleton looking really good off of a loss. Western looking, by their standards, not so hot off of a win. And part of that was, of course, Keon Edwards being held to, 20-something yards rushing? 29 yards rushing. That is bonkers. Tom, I have a 2-part trivia question for you.
Ooh.
When was the last time, and, I was actually kind of surprised, and this will give you perhaps a little hint towards just the time frame in which this question, the answer will be for this question, because I was trying to think, when was the last time Western didn't have a 100-yard rusher in a game? But the hint I'll give you was that the answer is also the last time Keon Edwards didn't have a 100 yards rusher. So you see what I'm saying? So like it actually was Keon at some, I guess I was thinking in my life, like Keon's probably had 100 yards in every game he rushed for Western. Not the case, but it was also the last time, of course, Western didn't have 100 yards rushing from their lead back. Do you have a hunch of what game that may have occurred in?
So I'm going to assume that it's in 2021.
That's a bingo.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who Western would have played in 21 with stellar defenses.
21, right? We would have had OUA West, OUA East, right? So you can kind of think about in that regard.
You know what? I'm just going to throw out. I'm going to throw out. Wow, I was going to say maybe Guelph, but I don't know. Let's go Guelph.
Another team that plays in an alumni stadium, but not the Griffins. Surprisingly, it was against the Windsor Lancers. And most surprisingly,
interesting,
because the final score in that game was 66-0 for Western. So you're there with the face that you're making, which I'm so happy we're on YouTube for people to see that look. How does Western not have 100-yard rushing out of their lead back? And this isn't a thing where it's like maybe he tripped up, got an ankle, whatever. He had 15 carries for 65 yards. Edward Renati, 5 carries with 52 yards. Trey Humes, the GOAT, 9 carries, 30 yards, 3 touchdowns. I remember him getting a lot of goal line carries in that one. But of course, Evan Hillock had a he's good at the football. 15 for 23, 321 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But here is the follow-up question. Hillock, like I said, with 2 passing touchdowns. Ooh, Jackson White's listed as a touchdown too, so maybe that spoils this. But 3 passing touchdowns. I'll word it like this. One of those touchdowns was caught by Savon Magne Jones. One of those touchdowns was caught by Seth Robertson. Can you name the third Western Mustang who caught the 3rd touchdown in that game?
Savon, we got Seth Robertson.
At Windsor 2021.
I will ask one question. Are they still on the roster?
Not this roster.
You know what? I'm drawing a blank.
Plays for the Edmonton Elks now. Your friend and mine, Philip Grahovic.
Oh, yeah.
Going in as the 6th offensive lineman in that game, scored his touchdown. So you know what? Magical things happen when Western doesn't have a rusher over 100 yards, though I'll admit, aside from Hillock's game, there wasn't all that much magic in this one. Let's get to this current matchup against the Carleton Ravens. And, you talk about teams that have historically perhaps given Western a bit of trouble, particularly sometimes when those matchups fall in the early part of the season. Carleton's a team that comes to mind. They're one of the few teams that's beaten Western in the regular season in the last 10 years. But for this current iteration of the Carleton Ravens, like we said, a lot of questions going into week 2 with them having the first week bye, going to a hostile environment like Laurier against one of the top teams in the nation. Year 2 of the Corey Grant era, a guy named Tristan going to be the quarterback, but we didn't know who it was, and Lefebvre looked pretty good. Yeah, is Josh Ferguson going to get going? We're still waiting on that one. But on the whole, trending up as a team. What are some of your thoughts? Carleton opened up the home campaign with the Mustangs on the road, and a Mustang team that, you talk about Queens going to U of T, perhaps the proverbial, bear hath been poked. You know what, Mac? Great showing, but you poked the bear, man. What do you think about this game?
Yeah. Well, you were the one who actually you reached out to a particular Western Mustang and wanted to confirm, hey, how was film session, and what did that Mustang say to you, Zach?
I'm pulling up the exact text right now, but what was it? It was a tough one. So I think that's an understatement. Like I'll let you continue. I mean, I've got the pleasure of meeting a ton of Western Mustangs over the years, current and former. Of course, first year doing the pod with Eddie Meredith, and of course the time I spent in London getting to meet a ton of those guys. And I've heard that Greg Marshall film sessions at the best of times are, like Apocalypse Now length level experiences. And I can only imagine what those dudes were in coming off of a win. But this whole theme today, aside from setting up for week 4, has also been just what are you showing in a win versus what are you showing in a loss? But yeah.
I think that there is, ooh, baby, there's a lot of things here that I'm sure these Western Mustangs are going to want to clean up. I will say, one of the things that has stuck out to me since I had the chance to watch it, live, but not live in person, was that 2016 win that Carleton had in Carleton. Wow, talk about shocking the world with that one. I still can't believe that had happened. And you mentioned, it doesn't happen very often. Here's your trivia. Ooh. In the past 10 years, how many regular season games has Western lost?
So, we're including the 2013 season?
Correct.
Okay, so 2013, that was, I think, the Tyler Varga year. 2013.
Varga was Varga's my age. He was 2011.
That was the 2011. Goodness gracious. All right, great start, Zach. Last year they lose to Calgary, though, in the semis, though, I believe. And they ran over Queens and the Yates. I think they went undefeated that year.
That's a bingo.
2014, I know we beat them. Did you guys? I think you guys beat them in 2014. That's
a bingo.
Okay. 2015, they went undefeated because they didn't play us. And then when they did play us,
what a flex!
A bunch of losers. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I already said no Greg Marshall slander will be spoken on this podcast. I'm not gonna try and go through every single season. I'm gonna say, so we know 16, we have that one in there. Lost to Guelph. Let's go 4.
That is correct. In the past 10 years, the Western Mustangs have only lost 4 times in the regular season.
Yeah, like I said, losers.
3. What's the last one?
Guelph in 20.
Yes, it is.
2018?
2018. Yeah.
All right. There we go, baby. Woo!
Yeah. Sorry. I believe that was 2021, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. Bad job by me.
I should have got that. Anyways, yeah. Point is, Western don't lose in the regular season very often.
No, siree.
Just a final little tidbit there, unless you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but in 2014, you won in Guelph, correct?
Twice, because we beat them in the playoffs too.
So 2014 with my team, and I do have a little bit of pride in this, is the last time that Western lost at home. It has been 9 years since they lost in the regular season at home. Folks, Western does not lose in the regular season, and only having won against McMaster 34-22, yes, Mac poked the bear. Western's pissed, and they're going to want to see some retribution here. You think Keon Edwards, the former OUA MVP, is going to be happy with 29 yards? Hell no. Carleton primarily runs a 3-4 defense. They are going to run the ball or attempt to run the ball down the Ravens' throat.
And I don't even think that future OUA MVP in Evan Hillock, and by future, I mean the future is now, is going to be terribly pleased in that performance either, despite his own proficiency. And the thing that sucks too is this ain't the game where Josh Ferguson breaks out. I don't see that being the case.
Yeah.
Hey, Carleton, you play York next week, though. So, hey, I'm going to bust out the number 23 Carleton jersey. I don't actually own, but Ferguson, you're still my dude. Yeah, I mean, but I think it was Jack who pointed out though, like, and I feel, I feel bad or whatever emotions. Maybe I have, maybe I don't. Kind of just like looking past so many of these games, but I think it was Jack who kind of pointed out that for Western, they go to Ottawa and then they go to Queens the week after. And so for what it's worth, the idea of taking care of your business, and it was Dakota who was at the York game and was pointing out like, yeah, this O-line's not as big as like we're used to seeing, right? And a lot of those mistakes we saw against Mac to me weren't necessarily the makings of an O-line that was just not big, but just hadn't gelled yet, right? Mm-hmm. And then you think about a guy like from the Carleton standpoint, like guys like Ife Onyeka, some guys in that secondary, Ottman Braun, Louis Laveau. If we're gonna see Alamin Shipalu in the mix again for them as well, it's as we obviously saw against Laurier. It's a fast defense, but then we've obviously talked about the big difference between how Laurier was trying to run the ball with Quentin Scott to the edge versus if they had Nelms perhaps going a little more downhill. Keon Edwards runs downhill. Well, Keon Edwards will run outside. He'll run, down the middle. He'll run over you. He'll hit him in the flats. He'll get you every single way you can. So in that regard, not terribly plussed in terms of that. Yeah, I think this is a pissed off Western team. And man, like you made the comment about Laurier, how despite not looking terribly sharp on offense these first two games, they do get to say that they've won close games at home and on the road. They've cut their teeth already. They get to grow from those things as opposed to like we saw happen to Western in the semis last year, in the national semis. That's when they run into their adversity and we see what happens. They hit their adversity already this year and they got the win. And yeah, like every coach, player, man, woman, child involved in the OUA that doesn't don Western Mustangs gear should be terrified right now. And Carleton, I mean, salute you, but we'll see. I don't know. What else you got, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, this is a Western team that's pretty established, that is pissed off, and it's a Carleton team that, while having a fantastic opening showing against Laurier last week, is still the process, I think, of finding themselves, certainly offensively with Lefebvre. So I'm interested to see what they do against the OUA's top team, and how do you respond? That's the adage that I talked about even last week. Western's going to score. Western's going to stop you. Western's going to do a lot of really good things. How do you respond? Are you turtling? Are you going for it? Or are you throwing haymakers with these guys game after game, play after play? That's the only way to beat Western. So I'm interested to see what Carleton does in this one. How do you handle these Mustangs going into your week 2, their week 3, but you're playing them at home? So I'm interested to see a lot of things. On the Western side, I talked about it going into MAC. I'm still looking for who is your designated pass rusher on defense. No sacks against the Marauders, I believe, or maybe there was one sack, but against a McMaster O-line that admittedly played a whole lot better against the Mustangs. And if you're going to play better against a team, that's a great team to do against. But the past year and even against Windsor showed a lot of struggles. And so you only record, I think, like I said, I think it was only one sack against a McMaster team that's got some issues on the offensive line. It tells me that you don't have a designated pass rusher, that you don't have somebody who can consistently get after the quarterback, and you need to send, maybe five-man pressure in order to consistently get there. And if you're doing that, you're giving up somebody in the back end, and maybe somebody's got a one-on-one. Against a lot of these topper teams, you've got some studs in the receiving core. If you give them one-on-one opportunities, they're going to win that and they're going to torch you. So I'm interested to see, does Western have an answer in the front four for who's going to get after Lefebvre and who's going to be able to pressure him and sack him? And are they going to continue to get better this year?
And I think it's important that you mentioned the front four, because I think as a front seven, Obviously, guys like Riley McLeod, Bowers Kane, Jackson Finley, Max Nixon kind of in the mix there, Murphy and Panabaker, some of the more halfback guys in there and whatnot. But guys that, in that sort of linebacker extended, position certainly have a ton of talent, but as you highlighted, you're then depending on sending pressure. And we talk about Western for so long. And, I do like Max von Muhldorfer in the middle, but he's more of like a classic, squat 600, bench 400, just like you can't move me type of dude, not someone that's going to be pass rushing, getting after QBs. And, maybe that's just not in the cards from this year, that they're going to be getting amongst the sack leaders in the OUA, and because we always talk about this Western defense, and of course you got Coach Gleason, one of the best in the biz, but that really they just sit in their base and they just trust in the talent, trust in how well they're coached, and just know they're not going to make mistakes, and you have to beat them. They're not going to necessarily try and outmaneuver you in any way, and they certainly have some of that talent coming from the linebacker position. But we'll see, because as you said, if Lefebvre, if it's not a flash in the pan, if he can give them some trouble, they certainly can't be bringing anyone into the box, adding extra pressures. And you know what? If they do get the run game going, that's a whole other question. But you know what? These are all possibilities that are certainly above zero in terms of the likelihood. But I think the story is that Western is just on a mission from, I don't know if it's a mission from God, a mission from the devil, Greg Marshall, maybe all three, but they are pissed off going to Carleton. It's Western in this one. As you said, I'm certain we're aligned on this one as well, right?
Most definitely. Yeah, it's going to be Western in this one, and I think it's going to be an impressive Western win.
Well, Tom, I hate the thought that we're kind of, leaving this week being like, but really tune in for week 4. But I mean, at the end of the day, we don't actually work for the OUA. So it's really just it's not our job to sell anything. It's genuinely, as you highlight, and one of the things that's nice about having the video, just actually see our enjoyment talking about these things. And some of these games, aren't as sexy as the games we're getting in week 4 and it's that middle chunk of the season. And as we see these teams establish themselves and get to see the matchups that we know are going to be really tasty, and as well, of course, some matchups that all of a sudden, like we said, Mac Guelph, despite the history of that, and especially for folks like you and I, given the time we played at those teams, being like, yeah, that's an exciting matchup, but now we certainly think that that's an even more exciting matchup, because we talked about with Mac having the week 9 bye. You look at a team like Guelph going to Carleton in week 9, and all of a sudden you can be picturing we've had so many great situations over the last number of years where all these crazy tiebreakers and things like that. So, we're hitting a glorious part of the season, regardless of how this week goes. Hopefully these teams are healing up. We didn't even mention, I think, the Laurier O-line and some of the things that we saw with them being banged up, and hopefully they're, figuring out their stuff. And of course, with all the other guys that we touched on. But hey, tune in live for Windsor and Waterloo to possibly hear me on the call and make a bigger ass of myself than I do on this. Once again, assuming that it is coming to fruition, I'll thank them again if it does come to pass on the review podcast. But thank you to Adam McGuire for even thinking of me to come on. So tune in live to that one. Show up live to any game in your region. Cheer on your team. If you're just a fan of OUA football like us nuts, then just find your local game and go check that one out. But one way or the other, we'll have these games in the books and be talking to you about them all next week at the 55.